Okay, notice that as I was typing that, it started running out of room here on the terminal and started shoving the command into the command host prompt over here, and you get a $ indicator indicating that the command prompt itself, the command you're typing, is longer than they can display it. So in that case, it shoves the command into the command prompt. If I scroll back over here, we'll see that the $ moves to the end here, indicating that we have more command showing up, more command on this line that's actually showing up on screen. So that's another really useful thing to know. Of course, if I hit enter there, it's going to come back and say that there's an error at this point. Okay. So another useful thing to understand is the delete function. Typically, you're going to have a backspace key on your keyboard if you're on a PC, or the delete key in Macintosh world, which is actually the backspace key in the PC world. Never could really figure that one out. But PC users tend to like using the delete key, which the idea is that these characters are going to go this way into the cursor. But the delete key doesn't function. I get a tilde key every time I hit delete when I'm inside a terminal. You can use Control-D to get the same function as the delete key would usually give you in, say, a word processor. All right, still an error there. All right, so from here, let's take a look at our running configuration and startup configuration that we have on the device. Now, the running configuration, if I do a show running config, now show commands show us what has happened on a device and what a device is currently set for. And show running config is one of those commands you're probably going to type quite a bit. So if I type show running config and hit enter, it starts building configuration. It's building the configuration because it's creating it based on the settings we have in RAM. So this is an active running configuration. Shows us our configuration is 2717 bytes, host name is switch, and we have secret passwords and a bunch of stuff currently set. Now these are all the things that I've set previously so I could do the last lab that we did, jumping around to Google and using Wireshark and so on. So I've got a bunch of things already pre-configured on this device. Okay, so that's the show run command. And I usually talk about it as a show run, even though the full command is show running -config. The other command would be show startup -config. Now show startup -config, or show start, notice when I hit enter, it says using this number of bytes out of that number of bytes. What it's talking about here is NVRAM, or non-volatile RAM. Now, technically, this switch doesn't really use NVRAM, not like the routers do. The routers actually have an NVRAM chip. The workgroup switch uses a simulated NVRAM in order to make it iOS compliant. Some little trickery of programming that the guys out in Silicon Valley of San Jose decided to do with respect to iOS in the case of the Catalyst switches. But as far as you need to know, this is NVRAM. So NVRAM is the stored configuration for this device. And as the device reboots, it's going to look for the NVRAM file, look for the startup config, and it's going to launch the startup config once the iOS is done loading. So this is the configuration that the device will get once the device comes through boot up. Now what we're going to do is we're going to erase this config. You might end up buying a workgroup switch to play around with as you're working in your studies, either getting one from work or getting one through the various channels that are available to buy Cisco equipment. But in this case, or in that case, you may end up with a situation where you have a pre-configured device and you want to start from scratch. So to do that, what we need to do is we need to erase that configuration. And on a switch, there's actually two files we want to erase.